Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Lance Knob with the Denali Consulting and 4% Breakthrough Communities, and I'm here today with my friend Dr. Randy Lehman, who was trained at Mayo and founder of Liberty Clinic and also a growing real estate investor. Randy, let's jump right in. I want you to tell us how you made it through med school with all the astronomical costs, student loans, however you did it, how you got started with real estate, and also how you started a private practice and created financial freedom in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lance. So, some of those things are solved with life hacks, and there's always a life hack in every stage of the game. You just got to go find it. So, thinking back to when I was in undergrad, how could I hack? What were the things that I was better at than other people? And so it was those classes that I was excelling in, and becoming a tutor, or becoming a TA and then a tutor, and then ultimately once I took the MCAT, I taught for Kaplan test prep. Um, and then every time you do something like that, try to push yourself, you end up becoming a better version of yourself. It enhances when you teach, it enhances the things. So then the next thing that happened, I did the same thing in medical school. I was a tutor and a TA for anatomy. And then once I became a physician, so that's when you finish medical school, then I was a resident at first. So every physician goes to residency, and residency salary is, low, and the hours are very high. It's not
Yes.
like you're a doctor, but you are. And the thing you can do when you're a resident is moonlight. So what
Okay.
that means is you could cover like urgent cares or ERs, and you're functioning as a independent physician when you're doing that, even though you're still a resident in some other specialty that you're going. And each specialty, it would be different. So, but for me as a general surgeon, it was allowed for me to do moonlighting in emergency room. And then I noticed little things like, I could go work in an urgent care like 9 to 5 on a Saturday. I only have every other weekend off. That's it
Okay.
for 5 years. And I see 20 sick kids, snotty noses, and I just feel sick and drained at the end of that day, and I got paid whatever, like $80 an hour to do that, which is great pay when you're a resident. But then I also realized, hey, I could actually work in an ER instead, overnight, 12-hour shift, because nobody else wants to be at that hospital during that time. I actually hacked it so my family could come with me to the ER. We would stay in a call room, my little daughter, baby, and eventually my son and my wife. We'd all stay there. There would be less patients. Sometimes there'd be no patients. Sometimes
Right.
there'd be three or four. They're more critically ill. But I was a senior resident at this point and actually pushed my skills as a doctor further along. And oh, by the way, you get paid more, like $120 an hour, and you get to do a 12-hour shift instead of an 8 or a 9. And when you're done, you slept most of the night and you feel rested and you still have your day, and you can do it Friday night and Saturday night. So it's like all these little hacks.
Right.
Those are the little things that each individual person, it's going to be different for them, but that will help you get through with less debt and more opportunity and more training, and become a better human being on the back end of it in whatever field you're in.
Yeah, I love that. So powerful. Yeah, it makes me think of, I know we're going to talk about mindset, but Jason Dries, our friend, and his mindset book, and just becoming the better version of yourself. So many of us, it's not easy to continue to put yourself in harder and harder circumstances. So yeah, nice job. Pretty amazing. Well, I feel like that kind of connects us into your vision, which I want you to share with us about, how bringing really world-class medical care to the rural community. Can you tell us
Yeah.
about that? And even, what you're doing as far as you already touched on working with your family. And I know some, even on some of the locums, you're continuing to do that now. And you've actually got your father, right, John, who I have the pleasure of knowing, working as part of Liberty Clinic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the next level life hack that I'm doing now is I'm taking vacation and working in a small hospital, but covering call, which for now it's only general surgery call in my specialty, and usually means I there's not a lot. I mean, it's only when somebody comes in with an emergency general surgery issue, and so maybe some days doesn't happen at all, but it's still that burden for the doctor that's there of like, I could be called at any time, even if I'm not getting called, and they need a break. So you're giving a doctor in their home community a break by doing locums. And then yet you're getting kind of a subsidized vacation, and I'm spending that time with my family, and we feel like it's vacation. The kids feel like it's a vacation. There's different ways to do it. I mean, there's locums jobs where you can go cover 24-hour in-house trauma call at a very busy institution, and you're just like, wired and getting just blasted the whole time. That would be totally different. It's just not something that I would do, obviously, with my extra time. Maybe I would do that for my regular job, but so that's it. And my passion is rural surgery.
Okay.
And specifically, I'm passionate about where I grew up, which is Rensselaer, Indiana, Jasper County, Indiana, and the surrounding areas. My family on both sides immigrated to this area from like Germany, Switzerland, several generations, like 4 or 5 generations ago. And we've been here mostly farmers, kind of plowing the same patch of earth. And I really believe in, I've lived in the city now, and I believe it more than when I was in high school. But I believed it then, that in the future and the vibrance of the rural places, and sort of more authentic, more in nature, seeing sort of God's creation in a way that's that you can't see when you're in a skyrise. So it's a great place to raise a family, and I want to give back. I feel like it gave me a great start personally, and I want to give back to my community. And I think most small towns in America are very similar to mine. In terms of the makeup, demographically, the aging population. There is a lot of poverty, but there's also a lot of good values. So that I want to support my hometown first, and then potentially have the ability to support other rural communities as well. And then for me personally, it comes through general surgery, and how does that play in at each one of these locations?
Yeah. So good, because I feel like there is a disconnect from, I'm right outside of Philadelphia, from, cities and, teaching hospital healthcare. And again, you were, trained at the Mayo Clinic, and to bridge that gap, I really think that is important. So, I mean, what are a couple of the biggest challenges that you're experiencing to bridge that gap in quality and bring it to the community?
Probably the biggest challenge has been the way that the medical system is broken right now. And people would say that even when I was a resident, I didn't really understand what they meant.
Right.
So everyone has been scared of socialized medicine, but we have it, number one. So 55% of my patients are Medicare, 15% are Medicaid. There's 70% straight government insurance. And then you've got VA patients. And then on top of that, you've got commercial payers for people that work for government entities. And even with commercial payers, the issue is that you can't, it's not a normal business. So a normal business, if your costs increase, your price increases. In medicine now, because I say we already have socialized medicine, and while we're scared of government involved in our healthcare, we instead allowed insurance companies to come in and do much worse, for-profit insurance companies. Now there's no such thing as price control. So you're selling a commodity, which is very frustrating to me. So despite the fact that, I don't want to play martyr or anything like that. Like I got a lot of lucky breaks, and I had a lot of people help me out, and I've had a lot of great opportunities. But in a way, when you do what I did, you give up your 20s to become this person. And I go, several states away from my family, spend 5 years doing 2,600 surgeries at the Mayo Clinic, higher numbers than the vast majority of people, even at Mayo, that trained, because I'm imagining myself back home in Rensselaer. How am I going to do it when I get back home and be safe, and all of this thought. And at the end of the day, Medicare, Anthem feels you do a gallbladder or anybody else does a gallbladder, it's exactly the same. We're going to pay the same, which, then the only way that you could differentiate yourself as being faster, which I don't know if that's necessarily the goal that we want, and so rather than like differentiate myself as a certain professional and then also being able to charge what I want, then I'm actually just producing a commodity, and I'm back to like farming corn and beans. And that has been the biggest challenge. That was your question, is what's the biggest challenge? And it's that, and that's the demoralizing thing where like the system is broken, and the doctor has been removed, but there's a lot more to it than that. The doctor's been removed, and the doctor-patient relationship has been completely removed, and it's all this administration and red tape. And I think it's can get worse, and it probably will get worse, and it may never get fixed. I'm not really sure. But it's got to hit rock bottom, obviously. And what most places ends up happening is there's a two-tier system where there's a system that you pay for, and then there's a essentially free system. And that's probably where we'll end up, kind of unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I see the same challenges in healthcare and with physical therapy. Insurance has so much control and really just drives the price down no matter what with quality. And actually even taking what you said a step further, it's actually like the larger players that have more negotiating leverage that get paid 50, 100, 150% more than the independent practices. So I know I'm personally committed to trying to improve healthcare. So we'll definitely combine forces. And we even have a friend, a mutual colleague. I don't know if you actually know Prashant Singri, who's really working on some innovative things. So it's really good to hear some of the challenges with that for medical professionals that are, really have their head down and working the day to day and facing all these same challenges, who want to diversify their revenue streams, because you've been, blessed enough to get into real estate. How can they do that? And how do you approach risk? How do they approach risk? Because generally we're trained as healthcare people and really not knowledgeable about, some of the business forces. So how did you do that? How can we do it? How can our listeners do it?
Yeah. Well, risk, the time value of money. And to me, it's the opposite. I'm not living in fear of losing what I have as much as I am in fear of missing out on opportunity that exists and living with regrets later.
Yeah, so good.
I think that's different than the average person.
Yeah.
But when they do studies of people that are in their 80s and they ask them, what your biggest regrets were, it was never not spending enough time at the office. It was never that I took a risk and failed. Nobody ever regrets, and that there are big studies where people have done this.
Yeah.
They regret not putting themselves out there, not taking advantage of situation, not telling people that they love them when they had the opportunity, things like that. And so I'm trying to be sensitive to that. And I think I do a good job. I've got a very unique situation in terms of life perspective, because I'm about to turn 35 and I have 4 living grandparents, and the oldest is 94. And at the same time, I lost my mom in a car accident 11 years ago when she was 49, and I was 22 or 3.
Yeah.
23, I think. And so, I'm very, and also as a surgeon, I mean, I diagnosed, kids with cancer in the past year, lots of adults with cancer.
Right.
And you don't know anything besides today. But most people, they're living not in today. And today is where all the magic happens.
Yeah.
Action only happens today. Your future self is based off of what you do today. People live in the past, which is depression, or in the future, which is anxiety, neither of which makes any difference. Only what you do today is the only thing that makes a difference. And my dad preached to me, living a balanced life.
Right.
And I almost intensify that with my person. I've taken a Clifton 34 personality profile recently, and it's like every day has to have certain elements of balance, or else I'm feeling out of it. Like I got to have that family time every day, but I got to have that productivity or work time every day.
Right.
And then the other thing that helps me is making a list and striking things and focusing on that one big thing that's going to kick me forward. So that's a really big picture mindset thing.
Yeah.
And I can talk details, whatever you want about like how I got into real estate or what might make sense for an individual person. But that's kind of the big picture that how I think about risk is more of a risk of what you don't do.
Yeah. And we're starting to get some questions, so please keep them coming. We've already got one. I'll share it with you in a moment if you can't see it. Is there anything specific for healthcare professionals to start to, diversify and get into real estate? And maybe you could tell us kind of your first deal or your second deal, or where in the journey you actually were able to, achieve this, wonderful financial freedom milestone.
Yeah. First, I just share some resources, maybe.
Yeah.
And the step one is educate yourself, but not to the point of analysis paralysis, but learn a little bit. So as a healthcare professional, you generally have a solid, stable job, typically with a good income. And that is your number one thing that differentiates you from a lot of other people. You don't have to become a realtor and like sell real estate and banks don't want to lend to a realtor because their income could go away. Banks want to lend to you. So you've got a lot of advantages just by being in the healthcare field to begin with. One, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was a book that I read when I was like 10 or 11, and thinking of your house as a liability, not an asset. And the only thing that's an asset is things that's putting money into your account on a daily basis. Also watching my grandpa and how he sort of slowly paid off boring, profitable investments throughout his life, and then reaped the financial security. And in his retirement was able to get himself the airplane that he wanted to have, and then flew to every public use airport in the state of Indiana and do all these cool things. It's because of those decisions he made when he was younger. That sort of inspires me. The next one is Bigger Pockets. They give you a lot of really free, good quality content. And they have several podcasts. And I would recommend just the regular Bigger Pockets podcast, going back sort of to the earlier stages, and they can talk about a lot of things. But one big thing that Brandon Turner talks about in there is there's 4 ways to make money in real estate. There's your cash flow, but there's also your mortgage pay down. There's your depreciation, which is that on paper, you're losing money because you're depreciating the asset or breaking even, and you don't have to pay tax on the money you made from real estate in the same way that you have to pay tax if you're moonlighting. You're making more W-2 income. And finally, the 4th is appreciation. So despite the fact that on paper you're depreciating, building actually appreciates over time. By buying assets like that, you give yourself options down the road. And there's other things such as 1031 exchange where you can continually defer that down the road. And so listen to them. And then there's another podcast I really like called the Real Estate CPA Guys. Okay. And for me personally, one really powerful strategy, some people have talked about this in many other podcast areas, but there's a designation called real estate professional status that is, it would not work for a 2 physician, family or anything like that. But if you have, like in my situation, my wife is a realtor, and all she does is manages our real estate portfolio, and she does some realtor functions too. Yeah. And so I can then use depreciation from real estate against my earned income. And then I can take advanced depreciation by doing cost segregation studies. It does mean you have to keep buying every year, but that also fits in with my long-term strategy of accumulating cash flowing positive assets. And I still have written criteria where I don't just buy a bad deal and let the tax tail wag the investing dog or whatever. But but as long as you're buying smart deals, then you can you give yourself more options if you're not just making money on a W-2 or 1099.
Okay.
Does that answer? I mean, that's kind of how I got. And then how I got started was actually a concept called house hacking.
Okay.
So that's very simple. Just buy a house and either buy a duplex and rent out the other side, or fourplex, or in my case, I just rented out rooms to roommates when I was in medical school, but it gave me a start. I did that in residency, and then I bought a 12-unit apartment with a partner, which was my grandfather, and really he just gave me the license to learn, if you will. And
Okay.
I'd shown some wisdom with my other two houses and everything, and I knew what I was talking about. And so that was, every deal that I've done has pretty much been my worst one, like my best one that I did so far, but everyone after it was better. So that's because you get smarter with it. And really, you just need to get started so that you can learn from each one.
Yeah, for sure. Let's touch on a couple good questions that flowed in. One is, do commercial properties take longer to lease between tenants? And what is your average lease term to try to get? Hannah's got it up on the
Yes.
screen if you ever see that.
Yes, they do. And the timeline depends a lot on what you're talking about. So if you're renting out trying to rent single tenant, so my ideal property right now for me is a single tenant triple net lease. Larger property, mostly what I'm buying is industrial, and like a 30,000 square foot building right now, price range of like anywhere from 1 to 5 million. One of my criteria is the property I buy has to be over $1 million, because otherwise it doesn't move the needle. So in those types of assets, it depends a lot on the market, and I have not lived through a total downturn market, but I have family members who have.
Yeah.
And the biggest risk in commercial investing is vacancy, for sure. And it can be like 6-9 months. In a bad market, it can be lower. I think right now it's probably less than that. But then again, it just depends, because if you're waiting around for your right tenant, So I have another property that's got 6 bays in it, and each bay is like 2,500 square feet. And that property is like a light industrial. And so it's kind of like a strip mall for industrial.
Okay.
And there you might see lower vacancy, but it also depends on who you're putting in there. So if you're putting in a tenant that is a corporation that's in multiple locations, that's true triple net, that's a great tenant. And then sometimes you'll get 3, 5, or longer year leases out of that. But if you're putting in a guy who maybe just started a business doing, auto repair, or just he has a lawn care business and needs a place to store stuff, I would probably look for a personal guarantee from that tenant. And you're probably not going to get longer than a year lease. You might be able to write options, but then maybe they don't want to do triple net, which, real quick, triple net, the 3 nets are taxes, insurance, and maintenance.
Okay.
So who's paying for each of those things? And like, if you rent it, everybody's rented an apartment, right? So that's a gross lease. It's not a triple net lease. You don't have to pay taxes. You don't have to pay insurance on the property, and you don't pay for the maintenance and repairs. You will pay for the utilities, but that's different than maintenance and repairs.
Right.
And so you can have triple net, which is where the tenant pays for all 3 of those things, double net or single net, depending, and it can all be highly variable. But like that guy that he's just running his new business or whatever, he's not going to want to do, it's going to be too complicated for him, and he's probably just going to want a gross lease, and he doesn't even know what a gross lease means. But your price per square foot may be higher because of that. And something like that, it's all, quality of tenant matters a lot more than like if you're in multifamily. I mean, quality of tenant, you still vet them with your standard process. But in terms of like turnover and just getting somebody in, you can usually just drop your price by $50 a month and get somebody in if you absolutely had to. Whereas in commercial, you can't. So yeah, you have to be capitalized enough with enough reserves and enough income, ideally multiple streams of income. And yeah, check in with me in 10 years. From some people's perspective, I'm probably taking more risk than what some people would be comfortable doing. But at the same time, my lifestyle is so low that I can just shut off all my spending, and I've got really high income now, and I could cover almost all. I mean, I could cover the whole thing if I had to.
Yeah. And, a mentor of mine was explaining, who's got a lot of real retail space, that you really need to look for businesses that are a little bit Amazon resistant or Amazon proof. So that's a new challenge. So you're getting some more good questions coming in. Another one is a little bit switching gears. But even before we jump into AI and robotic surgery, maybe just to let everybody know how we met each other, how we know each other. We're both in a national mastermind. When you speak about mentoring and paying it all forward, we're both part of GoBundance. You talked about Brandon Turner. So yeah, last year, I guess it's coming up on a year since we really met each other in Tahoe. And that was a great event. And yeah, I've had the pleasure of working side by side with you and your dad and meeting your team and family, which I want to talk a little bit more about at Liberty Clinic since then. So
Yeah. So Lance has been my coach. I mean, he's being modest, but he's been my business coach for how long? I mean, better part of this year.
yeah.
And he's been a wonderful coach. And if you're looking for coaching, I mean, he's not told me to say this, but I would strongly recommend him. He's been I told him early on, what I need is, I do need strategy, but I mostly need accountability. And he's been nothing but reliable. And he's never canceled a coaching appointment for any reason. He's always there. He's always prepared. He's thought about the things, and he's supportive. He's kind of like, he's a cheerleader and whatnot, but pointing out the smart, good things and bad things. He's not like, it's not fluff. There's no fluff. It's just, we're going to talk about the numbers. In the middle of all this, I made big changes to my business. We brought billing in-house. He has history understanding billing. He's taken my dad under his wing, and then my wife just says, I agree, best coach there.
Thanks,
So
Brittany.
he's been great. So, but you need a coach. Everybody needs a coach. And if Lance is right for you, depends on what you do and if it's something Lance can help you with. But you've really been a key person for me 2023 and helping me kind of keep it together and bring it back to what's important. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Oh man, my pleasure. This is meant to be about you more than me, but yeah, that's so heartfelt, and yeah, I appreciate the feedback, and yeah, the feelings are mutual. I love working with you guys. So yeah, so it's been fun to really get to know each other intimately over the last, coming up on a year. So jumping into this great question about AI and robotic surgery, and we already touched on the insurance companies having so much leverage. If you can see the question there, how will insurance company come up with pricing versus human doctors? What are your thoughts on that?
If you would ask a physician in 1922 to predict what would happen in the next 20 years or 30 years, at that point, it would have been unthinkable. And then now we're 100 years later, and it's really unthinkable. And I have no idea where we're going to go with all of this. At this moment, so robotic surgery is not as much as patients tell me the robots did my surgery. They didn't. The robot is just a machine that attaches to laparoscopic instruments, and the surgeon still controls everything.
Right.
It's just it takes out, the magnification is better. You get 3-dimensional viewing. Your instrument at the end, it doesn't just open like this. It actually has a wrist that has more degrees of freedom than a human wrist, but it's still controlled by the surgeon who sits at a console.
Okay.
And it takes the tremor out and little movements and things like that. So robotic surgery versus computer done surgery is totally different. And then AI, I mean, they've got AI trying to read radiology reports, and supposedly they can do it just as good. But we're not counting on it. The computers definitely can land airplanes better than humans can.
Okay.
But we still have pilots in the cockpit because we're very uncomfortable taking them out of the cockpit. So in the short term, medium term, surgeons are definitely still going to be a key component. And the main thing is, why do you need that human being there in the cockpit, for example, if there's something unforeseen, like, for example, say you get into bleeding. for an AI to be able to quickly triage and handle, that's going to be a very difficult situation. That's why you can't robotic surgery. They've done it across the Atlantic, but you still have to have somebody there that knows how to open the belly quickly and control bleeding if you had to convert from your robotic to open. So we're far away from either one of, like, from AI ever at, doing surgery, and then robotic surgery right now is just coded as laparoscopic surgery. So in terms of insurance, it's robotic surgery is still a human doctor thing. So how will it be paid down the road? I don't know. Maybe that's part of your public health plan, and if you want to go to the high tier, then you get a real doctor. I don't know, but I didn't say that, and I don't think that's in.
Yeah, well, I know Elon Musk with Neuralink is working on, a full-blown computer automated to put the, the leads to connect, the computer interface to our brains. So it's going to be interesting. We have a couple good questions flowing in, and even Brandon Neely made a great comment about W-2 income helping with loans. And I know right now, I'm going through my first short-term rental purchase, and yeah, definitely, and even refinance, in the past when we did not have any W-2 income was painful, especially during the pandemic when everything was really on shaky ground. So, FYI for everyone listening. You already touched on this, Randy, but is there anything else you want to add about mindset, just for you or in general, and how people can really achieve, the highest levels of success?
So the number one value for me is probably freedom. So where do you take mindset off of that topic of freedom? And I've talked and thought a lot about financial freedom as well. So for financial freedom, the thing that ends up moving the needle a lot more for everybody, almost everybody, is not how good your investment returns are or how much money you make, especially after a point. What really moves the needle for people is how much money you spend. And so, I've talked about hacking your life. I mean, gratitude is one of life's biggest hacks. So if you have gratitude, that's the next level to contentment. And contentment allows you to not just put off spending because you want more money later, you want more stuff later, but to actually just be happy with what you have. And so then you don't need to spend any more money. Now you can focus on a bigger, better thing. There's where your freedom comes from. So for me, I came out of residency. I'll give you one example, and the house is a big one for most people. So a lot of people probably should just sell their house and buy a trailer, and then they would be free. And most people won't, because most people can't stomach it, because most people focus on the wrong things, which is actually what somebody else is telling you or society is telling you that you want, but you don't actually really want any of that. What you want is time with your family, and you want, time, probably mostly time. And instead, working your butt off and spinning your wheels to pay for your big fancy house. So for most people, the big fancy house, it's not the cost of the loan payment for the big fancy house that's the issue. It's that once you buy that house, and this would be Millionaire Next Door kind of concept, Stanley, whatever his name is. So that house now comes with a bigger heating and cooling bill, bigger insurance, bigger property taxes. You have to buy the car that matches the house to sit in front. You have to send your kids to the right school. You have to buy the furniture in your house that matches, and you have to maintain it to a level that, like, you wouldn't tolerate. You just can't tolerate in certain other circumstances. So for me, when I finished residency, I was moving to Winamac, Indiana. I found a house that I wanted. It was 2 blocks away from the hospital, so hyper focused on efficiency. And I called called the bank, and I was like, I heard of these things, the physician mortgage loans. You could put like low or no money down, and I'm like coming out of residency cash poor, but I mean I had started to build some equity, and I was like on the cusp. And so I asked them, tell me more. Oh yeah, we'd love to lend to you with your W-2 income that I've showed them that I have in the future. This is in like February, okay, before I started my job in July. We'd love to lend to you $750,000, no money down, and name the house. Or if you want to go up to $1.5 million, 5% down, we'd love to lend to you. So I'm like, okay, great, because I got this 950 square foot 1950s house that I have under contract for $83,000. So that should be no problem for you. And then they said, well, actually, we're going to have to see about that. And then they came back to me and they're like, actually, our policy is that you can only do this within 3 months of starting your new job. So we can't really do that. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. I'll just take a traditional loan then, and you can just use my salary from being a resident, and that should still cover, it should be fine. And I'll just put 20% down. Well, actually, you told us that job is ending, so we can't use your income from that job anymore. Great. So the bank they just want to sucker the physician or the high income professional into the house that ultimately is going to be the major sucker move for that individual, because it's not just that house payment and that interest and all that you're going to be losing. It's also all the rest of the expenses that come along with it and the lifestyle creep and everything. So I just ended up paying for the house, and ended up calling my bank that I used in Minnesota on like multi-million-dollar real estate deals, essentially. And then, I ended up doing it that way. But long story short, ends up not being a meaningful part. And I don't think about my lifestyle expenses because I have them driven so low that it's like, and we just have natural processes in our family where we just would rather not. We think of consumer spending things as burdens rather than as things that we want to have. And it's like we talked about, well, even my friend had a camper he's trying to sell us recently, like in the last week. And we're talking about it. And it's like, well, what's the price? Well, who cares what the price is? If he gave it to you for free, would you want it parked outside? No. That's what my wife said. No. So ultimately, those consumer spending things become a big burden. And you just have to realize, like, mindset wise, what matters to you. And if it's time and freedom, then cut back your spending. And that's your immediate hack.
I love it. Yeah, so good. I mean, you're such an innovative thinker and so disruptive with your thinking. We talked about a whole lot. And if you have any sort of final messages or anything you don't really think we, touched on, I want you to share that. And definitely, if you could let everyone know how they can find out about Liberty Clinic, follow you or anybody on social media, and just keep up with all the innovative things you're working on.
I think just in a very brief summary, it's you got one life, one set of heartbeats. Don't know how many there are. You definitely don't want to be on a consumer spending hamster wheel in the middle of it. So focusing on that continual and focusing on value. What's your greatest value to the world? And it's going to change in certain times of your life. So your risk tolerance is going to change. The time that you spend with your kids is going to be more important at certain times than others. So where are you at today in your life? And worry about today, because it's the only day that you can live is right now. And then it's going to change, and just kind of roll with it. Every 5 years, I'm like a completely different person, and it's mostly life changes and circumstances that make you think about things differently. And that will help you, plus your, frugality, help you focus on living a life of significance and giving back. And so for me, like, I care about rural communities in the United States of America. It's important to me. Yeah. And I happen to be a surgeon. So that's the thing that's my thing. If you're interested in rural surgery, if you are a rural surgeon, or you think that you could use my help in some way, this moment in time, despite everything I just said, I have extremely limited time. But I have to be careful. But at the same time, my practice is Liberty Clinic, and it's Rensselaer, Indiana, and you can find me on Facebook, and you could send us messages through there. I've been intending to get a podcast off the ground about that for some time, so I got to do it eventually, because that's where it's not just me doing like colonoscopies and gallbladders for people that's going to change the world necessarily. Not that I'm going to, but my greatest, highest, and best impact is not going to be just doing that. It's going to be connecting with others and helping us all elevate ourselves. So if you want to reach out to me, that'd probably be at this time the way to do it. And I just generally believe that we have a lot of potential as human beings, but we sometimes get trapped in ruts and things. And so I want to encourage everybody to think about your life differently, spend a little bit of time working on yourself, get a coach, whatever it is that you need to do, join a mastermind, and you can do it.
Randy, so good, so much value. Love your family first, priorities. And, obviously we love your story and hearing about how some of those so-called hacks, because it is possible. What you just said, you've proven it's possible to really do special things. So thank you for sharing all of this. Everyone listening out there, definitely check out Liberty Clinic. Any really talented healthcare people and doctors, get in touch with Randy. He is growing the team, especially if you want to serve your own communities. He was literally born in the hospital that he's serving in Rensselaer. So Randy, thank you so much. And John and Brittany and everybody on the team at Liberty Clinic. Thank you guys. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Lance.
Okay. Thanks, Randy.